Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy, the home, at least according to some in the chat, of legal nerds. Say what? Are we legal nerds, or are we just citizens awake, citizens alive, people eyes wide open, looking at the
Shut up,
world,
nerd.
and saying, what TF, WTF is going on this planet? There's just too much going on. Where am I going to go for some justice? Well, I don't know. So, all eyes on New Hampshire today. The primary will take place all day today, and results come in promptly at midnight. They begin to trickle in. Trump is ahead right now by double digits. Last poll I saw had him at about 50%. Sticky Nicky Icky, the stealth candidate, was up there at about 35, 34%. Now, is that a misogynistic remark on my part?
Nicky, I still love that one.
Yeah, am I picking on Nikki because she's a woman? No, I'm picking on her because she's a dead woman walking. Here is the premise of her campaign. Anybody but Trump. Reid Hoffman, Linkman, Democratic money. Come on, bring it on down. I'm for rent. And she's not going to go away. No, if she loses every single primary, she's going to remain on the ballot because her great hope is that Trump becomes disabled to run and she becomes the default or stealth candidate. And, there's an element of genius in her thinking, because in the end, if it's anybody but Trump and Biden, and she's the last sentient being standing at the time of the election, the presidency just might go to her. And hey, if you want another candidate who thinks that government has the responsibility to ask questions about how to improve your life and then acquires the authority to impose what it regards as the right answer to improve your life, Nikki's probably as good a candidate as any. But if you want to break the mold, I'm going for Trump 2024 because I don't think the system's working, and I don't want it to work any better than it does, because candidly, when you put people in power, in the reins, in the saddle of the horse, they have a way of riding it on my lawn and shitting all over everything, and I don't much like that. Good morning, Michael. How are you today?
I'm great, man. I'm great, Norm. We've got a lively chat here on YouTube this morning. So good morning to Julian, Mari, Lutrell. Nice to see you all. Freedom Lover, you as well. Nerds! I like it.
So, yesterday we have on the screen January 6th committee deleted encrypted files just days before GOP took House majority. Let me tell you something. Our ordinary citizen starts deleting files in anticipation of litigation, and there's usually hell to pay. And it could be spoliation, an independent civil tort, that is destroying evidence in contemplation of a pending proceeding. It could be destroying evidence. Now, obviously, in the House J6 case, it was a special circumstances. It was a House committee that was investigating the circumstances giving rise to the riot on January 6th, which the committee report dubbed an insurrection.
And which report you read in full, right?
Oh yeah, no, I've studied it carefully. It came out during the Proud Boys trial, and we were scandalized that the court permitted the trial to go forward while one branch of government was basically dumping on our clients in a trial before another branch of government. But that's a different story. But let's talk a little bit about what people may not remember about the run-up to the J6 committee report. There were dueling, I don't want to call it subcommittees within the committee, but tasks, teams researching different things. Some were researching the right, the far right, what they referred to as right-wing extremists, what other people referred to themselves as patriots. Others were examining the White House. Others were examining social media. Some were examining fundraising. And each of these teams had research staff appointed to it, and they fought to get their material into the final draft of the report. Now, if you've read, as we have, Liz Cheney's book, Oath and Honor, I think the title was, you see what her take was. Trump is a horrible human being. He organized it, roast Trump, never Trump, never Trump, never Trump. And the committee report tended in that direction. There are a lot of unanswered questions still, however, about the connections between Trump and those on the ground. They've never proved the so-called missing links there. That is a circumstantial inferential case. And candidly, I'm telling you, there were no missing links there. I represented Alex Jones before the House committee, and Alex had said on the air on InfoWars that that his contacts in the White House wanted this, that, and the other thing, and so the committee wanted to know, who are your contacts in the White House. Well, my impression is that was a little bit of bluster on Alex's behalf, that he didn't have a contact in the White House, and there's no evidence to suggest he did. And I think the committee knows that. And so, you begin to wonder. And so when Alex, we had extensive communications with the committee. They sought to require Alex to produce electronic communications. We resisted that on Fifth Amendment grounds, and ultimately we won. We didn't provide them with anything. And when Alex appeared, as he was required to appear before the committee, he asserted his Fifth Amendment privilege. The difference between Alex Jones and Steve Bannon being that, Bannon just decided, screw you, I don't have to show up, and bought himself a contempt charge. He's been sentenced. The result of his sentence is under appeal. He's at liberty pending appeal. I think Bannon made the wrong choice. It was self-serving on his part. It put him front and center in the conflict, which he loves, and which is a monetizing event for him. And God bless Steve Bannon. Every now and then when I play video games, I'm thinking, this guy is a genius, because I can see how they're trying to hook me into spending $5 here, $3 there. And this guy's probably making a fortune out of people's idle time. God bless Steve Bannon. God bless the United States of America. Stupid decision on your part, though, Steve. You want to, when you get a congressional subpoena, your response isn't supposed to be screw you and the horse you ran in on. If you're going to assert a privilege claim, you go to the committee and you raise it. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself in a jam, as you did. But if it's good for ratings, Steve, hey, who are we to bitch and moan? But in any case, in the J6 context, there was a lot of scrambling. We want to prove that Trump directed events on the ground, and they never did. And the reason they never did is because, as far as I can tell, after spending hundreds of hours at trial on these events, after spending hundreds of hours scrubbing electronic communications for InfoWars and other people associated with the events on the ground that day, there was no connection, period. People turned up to protest. A riot took place. All hell broke loose. And now, as a result of lawfare, those charges have been turned into political weapons in an effort to prove that Donald Trump directed it all, so that he could be claimed an insurrectionist and to be declared ineligible for office. This prosecution, this theory is a farce. This theory is a farce, and it is intended to delegitimize those who protested results of an election with which they disagreed, and about the manner in which it was conducted. The election was conducted. They have serious reservations, and those reservations are real and exist to this day. You will very rarely see Mike and I get on a soapbox and say, "Yoo-hoo, Marjorie Taylor Greene." I'm just kind of not buying, QAnon with tits. I mean, I understand that Marjorie's got her place in the American political ecosystem, but she's a little out there for my taste. But on this point, I think she's exactly right. We ought to have same-day voting. It ought to be in person. It ought to be paper ballots. It ought to be counted. It ought to be counted publicly. And if it takes a national holiday to do that, that's fine. But the minute you transform the election day, the election process into a multiple day relay race with people handing boxes, bags, and this, that, of everything else of data, ballots, data from one person to another, you're going to start raising questions. And in a deeply divided country, those questions are going to lead people to get upset, and there are going to be claims of stolen elections. The best way to kill claims about stolen elections is to have a transparent and instantaneous election process, and it can be done. Now, what about inclusion? That great big buzzword of American life. We've got to make sure everybody with a pulse, we got to make sure that person who's just about ready to fade out and die in the ICU gets a chance to blink twice for Democratic or once for Republican and make sure that vote gets recorded. I don't think so. I think that if you can't mobilize yourself to get to the polling place on the day the vote has been taken, then you don't get to vote. It's just not that complicated. And it realistically, we have case law that says one person, one vote. We have a democratic theory that supports our adherence to the Constitution. But let's not press that theory to the breaking point, as I think we're doing with current election law. Let's have a one-day election. Let's get it on, get it done. So what's the significance of all this stuff missing in the House committees, the J6 committee? There's a suggestion that before the Republicans resumed control of the committees, because it resumed control of the House, Democrats decided to shit can or eliminate evidence that they didn't want to read about later, evidence that may disprove some of their talking points now. Now, I'm told that some of these files have been retrieved, and that we'll be able to read what's in them. And I'm looking forward to that. But what I don't expect I'm going to read, and this is going to come as a disappointment to some of you listeners who are ardent J6 conspiracy theorists, is that Nancy Pelosi in her office did it all. That there was some, rather than Trump being responsible, Trump the Antichrist, there was Nancy the alternative Antichrist, the dueling 666s of American life, who had somehow organized it all, and the federal government entrapped all these poor people, and the result was a false flag designed to eliminate the right and to empower the FBI. I mean, give me a break. That is about as far out there, in my opinion, as is the claim that Israel orchestrated the October 7th attack and is responsible for Hamas's atrocity in Gaza, all because it wanted to slaughter the Palestinian people. I mean, there comes a point where truth and common sense and what you can see matters, and bending every inference, bending every ray of light to cast a beam on your pet peeve and transform the world into some sort of ideological talking point is a disease that we've got to get over. But so I'm, all eyes on the J6 story about encrypted files destroyed by Democrats before the Republicans took the House. By all means, let's open those files. Let's locate them if we can. Let's de-encrypt them if we can. Let's call Benny and the Jets, and let's subpoena Liz Cheney and ask her, what exactly truths were you trying to keep from the American people when you went on your jihad against Donald Trump? And I'd like to know the answer to those questions. And I'm not sure that the answer is going to be that J6 was all an elaborate hoax. It was a riot that day, folks. And prosecutors took existing bodies of law and bent it to in shapes that I don't think Congress intended, to cover events on the ground and to criminalize people, like I think of the Proud Boys and the seditious conspiracy charges that they were convicted of. Absolutely ridiculous. Even Connor Mulrow, the prosecutor who argued the opening closing argument for the United States government, I think knows this. He told the jury, and I don't have the quote in front of me. I'll find it for you if you don't think it happened. Look, there doesn't have to be a plan to show a conspiracy. This could have been an implicit understanding that was reached at the moment the first barricade was overcome at the Capitol. That's enough for conspiracy. And candidly, that's all the government had. They produced not one solitary witness in 5.5 months of trial who could say that there was a plan to storm the Capitol that day by the Proud Boys. They produced not one solitary witness who said that there was a plan directed, orchestrated, enabled by the White House to have the Capitol stormed that day by anybody on the ground. At most, what they had is what we now have against them, against Congress: missing electronic communications. And the government was permitted to argue that those missing electronic communications were in fact, if there was a plan, proof of the plan. Well, how's the shoe feel now, Benny? How does the shoe feel now, Democrats, now that we're asking questions about what information you erased before a more robust fact-finding process could take place? My heart aches about January 6th and 2021. And let me tell you why. I think worse is coming in 2024. I see every sign of a bitterly contested election. And what we've now got is a Justice Department that's had 3 years of batting practice on the skulls and spirits and souls of every J6 rioter whom they've prosecuted, and it is now a well-oiled prosecutorial machine prepared to gobble up anybody who utters a peep about the 2024 election. By all means, I think we need to have the truth about what the J6 committee knew, what it chose to publish, and what it chose to hide, and what it sought to destroy before the American people could read it. Let's get it on.
Hans says, what's a missing terabyte between friends anyway?
I don't know. Let's find out. That's all. I mean, let's find out.
Well, I had up on the screen there for a moment just some of the facts about the missing records. So you've already mentioned the House Administration Oversight Subcommittee Chair Barry Loudermilk, and what he did is he sent a letter to the former Select Committee Chair Benny Thompson, who you were just
Benny and the Jets. Woo!
And from the previous article from America's Voice, I'm reading now, quote, one recovered file detailed an individual whose testimony was not archived, but, quote, most of the recovered files are password protected, preventing us from determining what they contain, end quote. The Georgia Republican is demanding Thompson provide a, quote, list of passwords for all Select Committee files. He also wrote letters to the White House and Homeland Security Department asking for, quote, unedited and unredacted transcripts of testimony from their officials before the former Select Committee. So I think, again, there were 4 terabytes in total expected, 3 delivered, and so we're missing an entire terabyte. And for those of you who aren't, necessarily, I guess, savvy with respect to the what are the measurements and weights effectively of digital information, a terabyte is quite a lot of information, right?
Yeah, how much is it actually? Because I was told I don't have a if you could you translate what a terabyte would be into pages? I mean, how many feet of pages of
I can give you, so I believe if I'm correct here, 1 terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes, right?
Well,
So
that helps,
Yeah. Right. So one gigabyte of information.
I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah. Well, 1 gigabyte is what, 1,000 kilobytes. So 500,000 A4 pages is what Julian has given us, which is quite information.
Well, that makes that we had, because there were 19 terabytes of information in the Proud Boys case as of October of 2022, maybe November of 2022. The United States government had gathered 250 terabytes of information about J6 in general, and information was continuing to flow in. They had to hire a private public accountant firm to create a database to handle it all, and it's quite a procedure if you're a lawyer representing a J6 defendant to get adequate training and access to the material related to your case.
Mari says 1,000 reams, and I don't know if that's a joke about how hard we're getting reamed or if he's actually giving us an adequate measurement there.
I don't want to really get an adequate measurement about how hard I'm getting reamed. Let's move on to the Supreme Court. We mentioned earlier, keep an eye on the Eagle Pass case, and here it is back in the news. In a 5-4 decision last night, the United States Supreme Court reversed an injunction issued by, I believe, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, basically saying now that the United States government is free to tear down concertina wire that the state of Texas had put up along the border. Now, let's talk briefly about the order, and then let's talk about the underlying case.
Here's the really loquacious order here on the screen.
Well, yeah, so it's an emergency order, but look at the pattern of votes. It's interesting. Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh would have voted to maintain the injunction. Sotomayor,
interrupting you just to put Julian's correction. 1 terabyte is about 35,791,427 pages.
Julian, I don't want to quibble with you, but are you sure it's not 428? Oh, Dawn. What was the dick joke? I'm not aware of talking about Mr. Cheney. I talked about his daughter, Liz. And, I mean, I don't really know what to say, about dick jokes. I mean, I realize that you're a woman of a certain age, but I do note that
Richard jokes.
I do note that after this broadcast ends every day, Dawn, what do you do to relax? You go play pickleball. Now, I think that there's a certain feminist logic to that. You don't play pickleball as a sport. You play with pickleballs as a form of Freudian penis envy. But let's move on.
Pickle the balls. All right. Where do we go from there, Norm?
I'm sorry, it's just one of those days. So the 5 justices who voted with the government against Texas included who you would expect: Ketanji, Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan. But then Justice Barrett, and Justice Barrett is often accused of being some sort of right wing ideologue. She's not really. She's a lawyer's lawyer. She's an institutionalist. And Justice Roberts, who it's hard to know
AKA
where he goes.
disappointment. Anyway,
It's hard to know where he goes. But the bottom line is what this says is it intimates that the Supreme Court is of the view that there is an overriding federal power that needs to be defended and vindicated here. But what's particularly bizarre about this Supreme Court ruling is that it takes place while the case is pending before the Fifth Circuit. Now, Mike, you took a look at the Fifth Circuit briefs, and I gather argument is going to take place early next month. What did the government argue in the Fifth Circuit?
well, so it's actually the brief that the government filed with the Supreme Court. So as they're briefing this for the Supreme Court, and you're correct. So the Fifth Circuit issued this injunction back in December, and the injunction was specific to the razor wire, right? It was Texas implementation of the razor wire. Now, Texas premised its lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security on a state tort law claim, right? That there was there was a taking or a trespass, and what the Department of Homeland Security has argued is that there's an overriding federal power that subverts or subjugates that state level tort. And so I think the Fifth Circuit is trying to reason its way through that, but in so doing, it actually issued a temporary injunction in favor of the state of Texas to disallow the federal government and to allow the state of Texas to continue putting up the razor wire and to disallow the government from actually cutting the wire and allowing people in. And there was a bunch of back and forth on that. But what the government has argued in its brief to the Supreme Court prior to this ruling, and I know procedurally this is really interesting because we do have an appeal to the Supreme Court of an injunction issued in a pending federal case, right? But what the government is effectively arguing is that they do have that federal constitutional power, right, to enforce immigration laws. And more specifically, Norm, the government has argued that anyone who is present in the United States who is not a citizen and they're here unlawfully or illegally still have statutory rights which prevail over Texas's interest in tort law claims effectively.
And this to my mind is a sort of bellwether claim that exposes both the strengths and weaknesses of federalism and suggests that the republic really could crumble. Here's what I mean. You're a Texan. You've got property. You've got a right and an interest in your community. And you've got settled expectations about the law based on your life within the Republic of Texas. Along comes the United States and says, we've got different ideas about how best to govern the country. And because our laws, federal laws, are the supreme law of the land, never mind about your health, education, welfare, and safety. We've got a distant bureaucrat in Washington who's going to impose a federal vision in effective open borders. And what's more, the person who just snuck onto your property, squatted on it, and on their way to a bus pass to wherever they're going, they have rights that are superseding your property rights. And if you're a Texan, what are you going to make of that, Mike? I mean, I'd be thinking, wait a minute, I live here. And they're basically saying my home, my community is a way station on the way to a bus depot. And what's more, I can't do anything to protect my property rights. The federal government's not going to do anything to protect them for it. And what's more, the federal government is going to stop my elected representatives in Texas from doing what I'm asking them to do. What's in it for Texas?
Well, it's an amazing level of gaslighting from the federal government, in my opinion, right? Because we're not talking about, an unlawful crossing here and there. This is a pattern. This is pattern systemic activity, right? And we're talking 9, 10, like by the time this administration has run its first term, We're talking about probably 10 million unlawful entries through the southern border into the United States of America under the Biden administration. And so when we look at what's on the screen here, I put it here just to give credence to what I was talking about earlier. The federal government says, and I'm just going to quote this paragraph, quote, "Federal law unambiguously grants Border Patrol agents with the authority without a warrant to access private land within 25 miles of the international border, as well as to interrogate and arrest anyone who in their presence or view is entering or attempting to enter the United States in violation of any law and is likely to abscond. Federal law further deems those who are present in the United States without having been admitted or paroled applicants for admission with certain statutory rights, provides for federal officials to inspect such applicants, and authorizes federal agents to arrest and detain non-citizens pending a removal decision."
Wait a minute. So if I hop over the border and I say I'm here, I'm deemed as a matter of law. I successfully snuck in, so now I'm an applicant. Is that what you're telling me?
This is what I'm saying. If we as a federal executive, right, branch determine that our border policy is to let anybody over the border, we're not actually going to enforce the border. We're just going to let people over. But also, once they're here, we're going to subvert and subjugate states' rights because we now have authority over how those unlawful entrants are treated because they have statutory protections within the meaning of the United States Code as ratified. Think about how insidious that is and how gaslit everybody on the Texas border is right now, because the federal government has decided that it is not going to enforce border protection at all. And then it's going to tell you right to your face, Texas and anybody with property along the border, that unlawful entrants and people who are actually in the United States now have statutory protection from the federal government, even though they're failing in a systemic level and an intentional level to secure the fucking border in the first place.
Yeah, no, it's untenable. Maury, I want to address
their legal argument. That is the cut and dry. That is the front and back of their legal argument to you watching at home.
Maury, you say, does this not give more rights to someone who isn't given any, I presume, by the United States Constitution? Pay close attention to the 14th Amendment, Maury. The more, many people, and this is a tricky issue in American constitutional law, in American law in general. The 14th Amendment doesn't guarantee equal protection of the law to all citizens. It guarantees equal protection of the law to all persons. And so once you are a person within United States, within the territory of the United States, under the jurisdiction of the United States, you have a right to equal protection of the law. And that's a distinction that I think is lost on many people. And implicit in the discussion about immigration is that somehow the United States is a corporation and that citizens of it are shareholders, and that people who arrive aren't shareholders. And because they're not shareholders, they have no rights within the United States as a matter of law. In fact, they do. The 14th Amendment denies the right of any state to treat persons differently under the law. And so it's a conundrum. And I think it shows its teeth in bizarre ways. We talked a few weeks ago, or maybe last week, about the homelessness case. I can't remember the name of the town out in Oregon. And what to do about homeless encampments. The United States has granted certiorari to that. Communities say, we want the right to issue citations and to prevent people from camping in public spaces. Some judges on the Ninth Circuit said, well, that's a violation of the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, because in this instance, people are being punished on account of their status. And the argument would be that not just property holders, but all persons have a right to live, and homeless people have to live somewhere. And so by extension, you can see a regime in which persons, even illegal immigrants, are afforded rights within the meaning of the federal Constitution. It's not a membership club. This isn't Sam's Club. You don't get a citizenship card with your birth certificate or your naturalization papers. Maybe you should, but that's just not the law.
Two things here. So one, Dawn says, Supreme Court in a bind here. Federal government has authority, but no legitimacy due to negligence. What is the solution? Yeah. So again, this is a temporary issue, in my opinion. Again, this case is active in the Fifth Circuit. So the Department of Homeland Security v. Texas is active in the Fifth Circuit. And what the Supreme Court has done here is merely end an injunction issued by the Fifth Circuit, but that's interlocutory, or as we would say, while another proceeding is happening in a lower court. And as Norm has already said, procedurally, it's sort of odd. But on February 7th, there are oral arguments. There are oral arguments in the case in chief in the Fifth Circuit. So for the time being, at least, we can point out the hypocrisy of what's going on. The second thing I wanted to say is simply this: what it seems to me to be is an invitation from the federal government for Texas to just put the razor wire on the other side of the river. If you want to do this about a technicality, if you want to say that because people
on Mexican territory.
Look, I
mean, that would raise then I think Texas would be enjoined as well, because they'd be invading the territory of a foreign nation, arguably inviting war.
But at least from a legal perspective, you don't have a federal government that could do this cowardly bullshit technicality about, well, they're already here, so now they have statutory rights, man. So we got to cut your razor wire, man. It's like, okay, well, if you're not going to enforce, if you're not going to do the due diligence necessary to actually guard the border, then we will step in and do that for you. Then we can have a fight in our courts about that.
So, Dawn, I think as I understand the question you've asked, the Supreme Court's in a bind. The federal government is the supreme law of the land, but it's not doing its job. What's the solution? I'm not. I candidly don't know the answer. What intrigues me about this case is it strikes me as I've talked before about what I call the vagaries of federalism, results of federalism that make everybody uncomfortable. This is one of them. You've got a federal system with the Constitution as the supreme law of the land, the state with the inherent in police powers. The state seeks to assert its inherent police powers on behalf of its citizens when the federal government refuses to act, and the federal government says to the states, "No, we've refused to act, and our refusal to act dominates the field and carries consequences that limit your ability to protect your citizens." Candidly, that's just untenable. And so I think what will happen in Texas is the law will be stretched as a result of the behavior of people. I don't think Texans are going to take this sitting down. I think they're just going to say to the federal government, screw you. And what are you going to do? Are you going to send in troops to protect the rights of illegal immigrants to enter the country and to prevent Texans from protecting their own property? There's a bad look. You're going to call in the National Guard against United States citizens, so illegal immigrants feel safer coming into the country. That's one possibility. And candidly, it's not so far-fetched, because I think what will happen is Texas will put up more wire. Federal officials will call out the Guard to go in and take it down. And you're going to have Texans saying, we're trying to protect ourselves.
Norm,
who are you trying to protect?
But here's my big issue with all of this. I was thinking about this early this morning. Because obviously this case is in everybody's mouth and ears this morning, and hopefully we've done a sufficient job of I guess priming people to understand exactly how to locate within the larger procedural framework. I think we have, but here's my bigger issue with the immigration topic in general: is there is zero explanation from the current administration, and I don't know if you agree with this, but it certainly seems to me that there is absolute silence or any attempt at justification for the numbers of people that are coming across the border, Norm. What is the explanation? What is the explanation? There isn't a formal explanation from the federal executive branch as to why it is that our immigration policy is as such, that we are going to incentivize untold millions of people, and we're not going to actually preclude them from coming in a lawful manner. What is the justification?
Sure. Well, wait a minute. Wait. I think there are broader forces at work. And I remind you of our interview with Rex Paris a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. He's the mayor of Lancaster, California, one of the communities in the outlying LA area, part of Los Angeles County. And he has been mayor there for a number of years. And he told us that municipal officials in that area have been told to brace themselves, that as a result of climate change and as a result of failed economies in Central America, there are 400 million people on the move. And what those people are looking for are minimal conditions of a decent life. And they perceive North America to offer that. And so let's say, for argument's sake, that the equatorial Central America is becoming a difficult place to live, and people regard a more temperate region as more desirable. They're going to move. And if you have a mass of people on the move, this is the problem presented in Camp of the Saints. If you have a mass of people on the move to an area they regard as more desirable, people occupying that area, the more desirable area, have choices to make. Do you try? Do you welcome them with open arms? If not, that's one extreme. The other is, do you kill them when they try to enter? In Camp of the Saints, the question was, do you sink the ships before they arrive? The ships coming from East Asia. And I don't think we want to set up machine gun nests along the border either. I mean, if there is a mass migration of people, and history is made of such things, responding to ecological and sociological pressures, you've got to do something.
Well, look,
And I don't know what the answer is.
Look, these people are not airdropped at our southern border, right? They are traveling largely on foot. I mean, overwhelmingly so, traveling on foot directly to our border and crossing over.
Well, what? Because the McLarens are out of commission. How else are they going to get here?
Well, what I'm saying is that seems to be a lot of geographical territory over which we do not have sovereign claim.
True.
And that implicates the complete lack of diplomacy from the United States federal government to stop that, right? So there's a failure at the diplomatic level more broadly. But if you want to get Americans excited about stopping this, talk about the prospect of ending the cartel's reign in Mexico.
Well, how have our experiments with nation building around the world worked out?
I don't care about nation building. We can turn Mexico into Puerto Rico.
The countries through which
we can turn Mexico into Puerto Rico if we want.
The countries through which these folks pass en route to the United States don't want them any more than we do. These people are the homeless of the world, and they can't wait to get them through their territories. What diplomatic initiatives are we going to have that says to Honduras, no, you keep them?
Right. Well, if they want any sort of favorable relationship with the United States, they're going to have to join in and create a 1 and 1 = 3 scenario to preclude them from pushing them to our southern border and dwindling our federal resources and the overall morale of our country. Right now, this is an absolute failure at so many levels, politically, economically, and then in terms of our morale. Like our country, our morale in terms of looking around and thinking like, well, what do we have to protect if our federal government is just going to abdicate its duty and say that these people, and then think about the technicality embedded in the argument that these people are here so they're afforded statutory rights to be here. And so Texas, you can't enforce these tort law claims.
Mike, I want to push back. I hear you. I want to push back. One alternative is to say that an illegal alien in the United States is in the state of nature. They don't have rights as a citizen. Therefore, we can destroy them.
I'm
uncomfortable with that as a humanitarian.
I understand it as an academic point. And again, just to call back to what I said
before. It's not an academic point.
It is, though. In this context, it is, because it's part of a system, a patterned issue. We're talking about an acute issue that has arisen under one presidency in particular right now. And so we're not talking about, like I said, in the abstract, here and there, unlawful immigrants being here. And unlawful immigrants have been in our country. And I mean, I'm 33 years old. So this has been a sort of, not a running joke, but it's been understood, especially in the South, right? That undocumented and illegal workers have been here my entire life. However, what we're seeing is not that. Right? Because the issue was always sending money back to Mexico for their families, this, that, and the third. The issue right now, Norm, is unique because there is no sense of, hey, entrepreneurship, hey, getting here, sending money back, whatever. It is getting here and extracting resources from the public dole with no prospect of entrenching themselves long term. It's just there's an importation, almost a vacuum of millions of people with no clear directive from the federal government whose exclusive jurisdiction this is, right? We have no communication. And under those circumstances, Norm, I'm not going to accept sort of the, someone in the state of nature. I get that. I feel blessed every day to have been born in the United States of America. But that doesn't mean that I have to be empathetic to the point of self-destruction, right?
I hear you. These are great issues. Look, folks, I'm almost done. I'll give you a more fulsome report with Erica Lee's book, America for Americans, A History of Xenophobia in the United States. I highly recommend, if you found this discussion about the immigration crisis in the United States to be of interest, I highly recommend this book. Lee does a long-term look at integration of peoples into the United States from colonial times to the present. I'm on the chapter now near the end on Islamophobia, which I'm finding personally very challenging as an Islamophobe. But I think what's going on with the current immigration crisis is we don't have a discrete sense of other or a foreigner that we fear. It's just the sheer massive numbers, and it's the sense that somehow we're being overwhelmed by a flood, and we're not rejecting those who are coming because of their characteristics. We're just rejecting the sheer number of them and asking what can be done to preserve our quality of life before it's too late. These are important issues. And as you can see from Mike's and my disagreement, it's not like we've got a script that we pre-plan in the morning. We're coping with them in real time, as are you. We appreciate all your comments this morning and ask you to come back because this issue isn't going away, and neither are we. Mike, how do people find us?
Every day, every weekday, that is, at 8 a.m. on X at LawPod Daily. Please follow us there. Our new goal is 1,000 followers there. You can also find us on YouTube at LawPod Daily and also on Rumble at Law and Legitimacy. And if you don't catch us live, we typically go 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the day and how excitable the topics might be. But if you don't catch us live or otherwise prefer the audio only, we are on every major podcast platform. That is Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Audible, Overcast, wherever you find premium podcasts. Subscribe to us there. Leave us 5 stars and a nice comment, or leave us alone. And we've had some YouTube comments here lately, which have been thought-provoking, but also a signal that we are starting to reach an audience other than those who might be inclined to agree with us just from the jump, which I really like. And I do encourage those people who have negative comments to share to stay for more than one soundbite, right?
And we also, we've started a newsletter. We're going to try to, we're not going to try. We've now had our second weekly edition. We're going to do it weekly. Well, there'll be essays. Sometimes the essays will look back on the week and the discussions we've had here to flesh out issues that look a little different on a moment or two thought. And we'll provide you with what we're reading and links to other sites. The goal at Law and Legitimacy is to recognize the world for what it is, a deeply troubled and fractured place, and to create a community of people who, if they aren't like-minded, are at least alike in the contention and the belief that use of their minds is the only thing that will separate us from the savages in the years to come. So we don't have all the answers. We don't even necessarily know the right questions, but we have a shit ton of fun going through what we do every day, and we hope you'll join us. So thanks for tuning in this morning. We hope to see you tomorrow.
Yeah, and perhaps last but not least here, Norm, I'm just going to quickly introduce the Everyman's Constitutional Law, something that you're also building in real time. These are going to be audio, video segments combined with written study guides. And these are going to be something we publish monthly coming up.
I'll do I'm struggling to enter the formal study of the textbook because I've got one more prelude to do, and I'll probably do it this afternoon, and that is why the Constitution is not a good piece of political theory. And so when you're reading the Constitution, you've got to decide what it is you can find there. You're not going to find as much as you think. And when people look for more in it than it sustains, we end up with awkward results like the Freemen or like militias around the United States that can be profoundly destabilizing. So stay tuned. Lots to think about, lots to talk about. We love hearing from you. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for everybody on Rumble and on YouTube. And we actually had somebody on X commenting today as well. I see all of you. Thank you for being here. We will see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Bye, Norm.